The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Life with Open Pages Publishing. We all have a purpose in life. Sometimes we just need a little motivation to point us in the right direction. This show is designed to help you create the life you were meant to live. I'm your host, Michelle Spikanis. My goal is to motivate you to make simple life changes so you can experience a life with meaning, direction, love, and peace. Now let's start the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Life with Open Pages. Tonight, we're going to talk about beyond money, what makes a satisfying retirement. You know, when people start to plan for retirement, they focus on money, which, while that's very important, my guest, Gary Sirak, will talk to us about the good, the bad, and the really bad side of retirement, and what you need to do to make your retirement years terrific. Welcome to the show, Gary Sirak.
Thank you, Michelle. Pleasure to be here.
Hello. So happy to have you on the show, especially talking about money. You know, it's hard to say that while it's important, money's not everything. It's like, whoa, wait, we're talking about retirement. So tell us about yourself, about your background.
Yeah, I've a financial advisor for the past 40 years, family-owned business. My dad started in 1957. I took over probably 20 years ago, and the third generation sits next to me. It's really nice and unique. Not many of us around that go 3 generations in that world.
That's wonderful. That's great. So, and you also have your own company, correct?
Oh, yeah. Sirak
Yes.
Financial Services. I set that up many years ago, and we do financial advising and benefits and retirement planning and pretty much standard procedure kind of stuff in our industry.
Okay. So tell us, why isn't retirement about the money?
Well, right away, everybody who comes to see me, the first thing and the only thing they want to talk about is money. So I know that. And so we have to deal with that, Michelle. No way around that. And we do. But what happens is the money is just the start of it. It's not the living end. It's not what it really is all cracked up to be. You got to have it. I mean, you got to have food, clothing, and shelter, obviously. But it's amazing how many people think that's the end of the game. And that's actually the beginning.
Okay. So what would be the next step, though? How do we know when we're ready to retire?
Well, that's a tricky question. And that's not, everybody has their own threshold of what they want to do and what retirement looks like. So what I've found over the years is my retirement isn't going to be your retirement. It's not going to be anybody's retirement except my own. And that means I got to figure out what really would make me happy in retirement. Is retirement even really real for me? And that's a whole other issue. I have lots of people who come in thinking they're ready to retire, and then they end up thinking, maybe not so soon. Maybe I don't have this figured out yet. Like the rest of their life would be a little bit of a problem.
Sure, because, you know, some people retire at 59 and some retire after 62. So what do they have to consider in order to make those retirement years terrific?
Well, I have this thought process. A long time ago, I climbed the Teton Mountains, and I was a kid and I was with some friends, and that was something I thought would be fun to do. It was fun, but it was really hard work. And I kind of look at work as climbing that mountain, that we kind of work our way up the mountain. You have switchbacks and you run into rain and animals you didn't intend to meet on the path, and all kinds of interesting stuff happens. And I kind of look at our life as working, and it's the same thing. The difference is when you get to the top of the retirement mountain, you look at that and you say, oh man, I got this. I've got this made. I've worked my whole life. I plant my flag. I kick back and get in my easy chair and drink a few cool ones. And then you realize, wait, I got 26 more years to live. What am I going to do?
Sure. And there is a lot to consider there, because let's face it, as we get older, you know, some of us have health problems or health issues. We have children that all of a sudden maybe have issues of their own. And of course, as parents, we want to kind of help them out. So, what are some things that we need to be on the lookout for?
Well, the first thing is, are you really ready to retire financially? I mean, that's a quick assessment of math. You know, if you have enough money to pull that off, then yeah, you definitely want to go the next step. If you don't, then you better get serious and figure out how to get to that step if you really did want to retire. After that's done, then it's a matter of really sitting down and trying to figure out what would make you happy. I ask a question in my office all the time. And after we do the money thing, I say, okay, tell me what's next. And they kind of look at me and say, what do you mean? I said, well, tell me what your first day, your first week, your first month, your first year is going to look like in retirement. I want to know what your plans are. And then I get very quiet. And they are usually like a deer in headlights. They have no idea what's really about to happen to them and how their world is going to change. And they think it's going to be, oh, this amazing thing. I got 7 days a week off. Well, guess what? 7 days a week is a lot of time to fill. And if you don't have it figured out, it's a problem.
That's very true. I've seen a lot of people that go into retirement and maybe the first week or two is great. You know, they're golfing and playing tennis and visiting people, and it's wonderful. And then all of a sudden it hits. Now what? So I understand what you're saying. You can only play so much golf, which I don't golf, so I probably shouldn't say that. I'm sure a lot of people could play it every single day if they want to. But you do still have to fill your days, like you said. Now, on your website, I read something about the 3 Ps. Tell us about the 3 Ps.
The 3 Ps are purpose, passion, and a plan. And Michelle, those are the key to the whole thing, quite frankly. There's a couple things that I think are extremely important about preparing to retire. And purpose, passion, plan they're the cornerstone of the whole thing. They're the pillars. And so I look at purpose. Purpose is what you do for other people. So when you get up in the morning, if you have purpose, you're going to help someone else or do something for them. Passion is what you do for yourself.
Okay.
What do you really like? What's excuse me, important to you? And plan says, how do I put all these how do I get them going? How do I get this engaged and started? I need a plan. And those 3 things really comprise the book that I wrote called How to Retire and Not Die, the 3 Ps that will keep you young. The reason I wrote that book is those 3 Ps are critical to a successful retirement. Everyone I've seen had the 3 Ps.
Okay. So, and I get that because it does sound, I mean, even in planning our life in general, those 3 Ps are definitely important because we are supposed to help other people. But of course, we have to take care of ourselves or we can't help other people. And we have to have a plan. So in basing our life on that and then looking at our retirement on that, which part do you find the most important? Would it be the plan?
No, I think the other 2, well, they all 3 work because it'd be like a 2-legged stool. You know, if you had purpose and passion, no plan, it wouldn't get you anywhere. And you can't thrive on just one of the 2. My sense of this is, I think it's a process, and we go to purpose first. Mm-hmm. And I approach purpose because I think people have a tendency to, not think through what they do for other people. And so I think purpose is extremely important. I have clients of mine who retire and go to work doing, I have one great one. He was a truck driver. What does he do now? He delivers Meals on Wheels.
Oh.
And he loves talking to people. He was always talking when he was driving. I mean, that guy could talk 24 hours, I swear. But he loves doing that. And now he's doing Meals on Wheels. He gets to see older people that can't get out. And he's become their lifeblood. And he said it's the best thing he's ever done. He said it's just great. So he's got purpose, passion, and a plan. And his plan is he does that 3 days a week.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure, you know, I know a lot of people right now that are not working and they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing or who they're supposed to be helping. So, you know, stories like that are really helpful just to kind of give someone an idea of what else they can do. What are some other stories of people that have gone from the working force to retirement and kind of still doing the same job?
Well, I had one of the funny things that happened, I was at a company that I do business with, and I ran into an executive who was going to retire. And he said, "Hey, you got a minute?" I said, "Sure." We dove into his office and talked for a few minutes. And I said to him, I said, "What are you planning to do after retirement? Because as far as I know, this is all I've ever known you to do." And he said, "Well, it's really interesting, Gary. I've been trying to figure that out, and I've had a hard time with it. And, maybe I can play golf." Again, he's not going to play golf 5 days a week or even close. And he said, "Well, I was thinking about gardening." I said, "Have you ever gardened before?" He said, "No, but I was thinking about trying it." I said, "Okay." I said, "Try anything." But I said, "I have a better suggestion." I said, "Instead of you quitting cold turkey, why don't you go talk to the man that owns your company and see if he would be interested in having you be around part-time just to help the new people transition, since there's no way he's going to get what's in your brain without getting it from you." And he looked at me and he said, "I never even thought about that." And he said, "I really don't want to quit. I just didn't know how to approach it." I said, "Well, try that and tell him, by the way, you're not going to work as much. You'll take a pay cut gladly, but you can come in and try and help him get established." And the owner came back and thought that was an amazing idea. And that gentleman is still working 2 years later, part-time on his own schedule. And he is one happy man.
That's great, because, that is true. Even taking on a consultant role at a company that you worked at to continue helping out and leading them, but maybe part-time is definitely a great idea. Now, what about, I find so many older Americans, anybody actually, that they retire and then all of a sudden 20 years later, they're back working, whether it's at Publix or Walmart, or what happened?
Well, actually, there's this thing called bored to death, and it's real. I have clients that are literally bored to death. And I have one gentleman, he was a national sales manager for a company, made a really good living, a very nice guy, traveled the whole nation. First class, stayed in the best hotels, all that stuff, retires. And after 2 weeks, we have coffee one morning, and he says, "Gary, I am so miserable. I cannot figure out, I've got to do something." And he said, "I haven't lived with my wife in over, whatever, how many years." He said, "We've always had separate lives because I'm on the road all the time. She's here. It's not working out well." He said, "I have got to find something to do." And I said, "Well, we talked for a little while, and I'm not sure I was a great help to him, but we had a good conversation." About 2 weeks later, he calls me up. He says, "I found it." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm an Uber driver." He said, "I am having so much fun." He said, "I get up in the morning, I go to the bagel shop, I sit and have a bagel. I have my phone there. And if the phone rings and it's somewhere I think I want to go, I take the job. If not, I don't. I don't really understand Uber, but I guess you have some flexibility." And he said, "I am having so much fun meeting all these people." He said, "You wouldn't believe the people I've driven all over." And he said, "This is like great." And I said, "Are you making any money?" He said, "No, but I don't care about that." He said, "I'm sure I could if I wanted to." He said, "But that's not really the whole idea. I just wanted not to be bored."
Sure. And when you just said, that kind of sparked something with me. You said that people, they haven't lived together in a long time. How many of your clients that once they reach that retirement age have possibly gone into divorce?
Oh, I don't want to try and count them on 2 fingers. Believe me, there's a lot of, I don't have enough hands. It's not pretty. And part of it is because of that. All of a sudden, you're thrown into living together, and you're doing it full time when you haven't done that for a long time. You can get on each other's nerves pretty fast. So I've had way more divorces than I like to mention. I did have a really strange story, and I wrote about this in the book. There was a gentleman who ran a very successful company, a real estate company that I knew. And I worked with him for years. And he finally said, "Gary, I'm going to retire." His wife was really kind of encouraging him to retire. I don't know why. I never really got the real story about what that was about. I think she wanted to travel a lot or something. And he finally agreed. And so he took a position and kind of slowed himself down to the point where he was a couple days a week, maybe. And he's got his protege in there. And so about probably a month after he had retired, I ran into them in the parking lot of a grocery store. And we had a nice chat. And then I went in the store. They went their separate ways. Well, a little while longer, as I'm wandering through the store, I hear a voice, 2 voices. And it wasn't like they were getting along well. And I looked down the aisle, kind of peek around the corner because I don't want anyone to see me. And I knew who it was. And he is holding a package of Oreos in his hands. And his wife is just reaming him because he's got these Oreos in his hand. And she's giving him a very hard time. And, I don't know what his health issues were or whatever, but all I know is just one pack of cookies. But he sure was getting a lot of abuse. And I thought, I am sure that gentleman thinks he would be a lot happier if he was still running his company and not being reamed for getting a package of Oreos. But I'm just guessing.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So when you work with your clients, and of course, you ask them, are they ready to retire? Do they have the funds to retire? What other kind of tools or resources do you have for them?
I got a couple things I really like. The wish list is something that I think is really critically important. And the wish list is all about when you were working, what did you wish you were doing, but you couldn't do because you're too busy working? And I literally had one for myself. And it was a rolling stream of things. I want to play golf here. I want to go visit Charleston. I want to go to Savannah, Georgia, whatever it was at the time. And I wanted to learn how to play the bongo. So I have all these things that are on my wish list, and I never had time to do them. And as I got to a little more time off, I started picking them off and knocking them off one at a time. But what I found is that going through that wish list was really fun. It took me some time, maybe a glass of wine or two, and to relax and really go back and say, okay, what did I like when I was a kid? That's the other question. I said, what did you do when you were a kid? And so I used to ride my bike. I said, well, how long has it been since you've ridden your bike? They said, well, about 50 years. I said, well, go slowly. But, things like that. I have some people who said, I used to play tennis. I used to do this. I said, those are all great. Why don't you try them out? Maybe instead of tennis, you might try pickleball. But it's really creating that list, that kind of to-do list. And I like wish lists because it's something you can do. And I've really made a point of making it very fluid, Michelle. I cross things off and add them all the time.
Almost sounds like a bucket list.
Yes, it is a bucket list, except the bucket part's you're dead and the wish list is you're still living. That's my distinction of the two.
Well, that's a really good distinction. That's needed.
I like that part. Yeah, I'm a fan.
So when we're making this wish list, this costs money. So how do we plan for that?
Well, some things cost money, some things don't. Some are just, okay, I want to go I want to plant a garden. I mean, I have a guy literally who retired and all he does is garden. Now he has the money to garden. I mean, he doesn't spend much. He buys plants and then he tends to them. And he is probably the happiest retired guy I know. He's just playing in the dirt. I mean, he is just one happy guy. And when I talk to him about once a year, he'll let me know how it's going, how his crops went. And what he did is he pretty much took up the whole backyard and ground it up and turned it into his own little mini farm. So that didn't cost him much, just hard labor. So some of these things on the wish list do cost money, but a lot of them don't. I mean, my bongos weren't very expensive. Of course, I'm not very good, but they're still there and I still play them. And my wife I got to make sure she's not in the house, but we're good.
Yeah, I can imagine some of these hobbies and stuff that people pick up. It really could drive an additional wedge in between the couple too. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Michelle, I have one story. There's a gentleman who decided he always wanted to be in a band when he was a kid. Well, he never did. It was on his wish list. So he went out and bought a full set of drums.
Oh, wow.
He's never played drums. He had the drums set up in his basement. The guy came over, tuned them, did all the things you're supposed to do. He neglected to tell his wife that he was getting drums. And she doesn't get on the basement. There's no reason for her to get on the basement. And one day he's beating on these things. He has no idea what he's doing. And she thought the house was falling down. Anyway, that was not a good scenario. So eventually it worked out that he would take lessons and that he would only practice when she wasn't around. And then I think this was a mercy thing, but his drum teacher, who sold him the drums and did everything, finally pulled him aside one day and said, you're really not going to ever be any good at this. And I don't want to take your money. And quite frankly, I'm sorry, you just don't have the rhythm it takes to be good. And the guy looks at me and says, well, what am I supposed to do with the drums? He said, well, I've kind of already taken care of that. There's a local school I called and they would love to have your drum set if you're willing to donate them.
Wow. I get that. Sometimes we want to do something and we think we could be really good at it, but it does turn out maybe we're not so hot at it. And, a lot of times that's in saving our money. We try. Do you have any kind of formula or any kind of, calculation or tool or resource that you could share with us to help us to learn to really save that money?
Well, I wrote my first book was called If Your Money Talked, What Secrets Would It Tell? And the
Mm,
reason I wrote that book, Michelle, is because no one teaches anyone about money anymore. And
right.
it's very, very frustrating. So I decided to put together what I consider to be somewhat of a primer, just a book of stories about people, what they did good with their money and what they didn't do so well with. And one of the key points in that is getting your arms around your credit card. There's so many people
Mm,
that are buried in credit card debt, they just don't have a clue how to get out. So I have a solution to that. And I ask them to, number one, get rid of all the cards except one. Two, turn it into a debit card. Three, I want them to have a plan that they will only buy things with cash. And when they run out of cash, they will not use their debit card unless it's an absolute dire emergency. And that what happened when I started getting my clients to do that, and I've had a number of them,
mhm.
all of a sudden they had more money than they had thought because they were actually paying attention to what they were buying and what they were spending their money on. I'll give you one example. One of my clients was a Starbucks person, and they were in Starbucks only 7 days a week, and that's because they're not open 8. So
Oh,
they were there all the time, sometimes twice a day. So we sat down and figured out how much money they were actually dropping at Starbucks. It was a huge amount of money. And once they really realized it and were paying it with cash and paying attention, they realized that they didn't need to go to Starbucks twice a day, and they could probably go maybe 3 times a week. And so it would be more of a treat than an expectation.
mhm.
They just took the Starbucks money and started paying down their credit card. It was kind of incredible. So
That's great. Yeah, I kind of did the same thing not too long ago. I wasn't at Starbucks every single day, but I, made my trips, and I got to where I'm probably one of the only people in the world that still keep a check register. I know a lot of people don't do that anymore. They just go by what's in the bank, and I'm talking mostly about the younger generation.
yeah.
But of course, I still keep a check register. And when I really went through that register, I could see where, Starbucks, all the eating out and all the money, that was just kind of being blown on things that, weren't as important as maybe, paying extra money to pay down your bills, because, not only do you want to pay those credit cards off, but you want to start paying down your home loan, and you want to start paying down your car loan if you have one. So, it is important to stop and really see where your expenses are going. So, that said, with our younger generation, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, it's funny. One of the things I tell them, and it's incredibly simple, and people say, "Well, that's too easy." Don't spend more than you make. I am amazed at how people do not have budgets. I mean, they have no clue what they spend it on, and what I really try and encourage my younger clients is to really get their arms around where their money is going and how they're spending it. And once I get them to do that with a budget, sometimes there's this amazing aha moment, which is really exciting because all of a sudden the light turns on and they say, whoa, if I do this, I could really get ahead of this. I try and encourage them to fund their 401ks. I find so many of them say, oh, I got years to do that. I said, no, you don't. You need to start now and start with whatever you can afford, but you definitely want to start now. Waiting is not a good solution to retirement. If you want to build up assets, you want to pay down debt, you need to start putting money away any way you can. And 401ks are a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that kind of stuff is not taught in school. I did write a life skills book several years ago, and I've kind of updated it here and there. And I tell you, a lot of the financial information, it is not taught in school. So when kids start working, even if it's at Publix or the local grocery store, they don't realize how important it is to start that retirement and to get that going. And it's just so frustrating because, as we got older, we realized, wow, maybe I should have started sooner, right? Instead of later. But they look at you like you get you 3 heads if you're telling them, oh, but you need to start a retirement account now. They think, I'm too young. I don't need to do that. But it's just so untrue. So, I guess we just need to work on that. So what is your advice for someone, say, in their 40s, that really hasn't done a whole lot to put into like a 401k or a retirement account? What kind of advice do you have for them?
Start. I mean, I just can't tell you how many people walk in the office and they say, yeah, I'm going to be 50 soon. Do you think I should start planning for my retirement? I said, are we talking about what to do in it or no money? And I said, yeah, probably 20 years ago would have been good. But realistically, they just need to take action. And it goes back to having a plan. Well, the plan says, okay, let's start actually putting money away. Let's put it in a place that we can't touch it. The government's going to let us deduct it. So that's great. And that will help substitute everything that we're not doing properly by doing something properly. And, Social Security will be whatever it is. And it's really we're dependent on ourselves. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to do this for us. It just doesn't happen like that anymore. So it's a matter to me, Michelle, of taking responsibility. I think that's what I really try and stress with my younger clients. Please take responsibility because no one else will. And if you don't, you're going to wish you had. And that I can promise you.
Yes, that is great advice. We're going to stop right there and we're going to take a short commercial break. It's time for a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. At Open Pages Publishing, we offer coaching, marketing packages, and other professional writing services such as a resume, articles, copywriting services, press releases, social media, and blog posting. For more information, email us at info@openpagespublishing.com. And now back to our show. Okay, this is Michelle, and we're back. We're talking about Beyond Money, how to make a great retirement. And we were just kind of talking a little bit about budgeting and talking to the younger generation on starting now to start to save for retirement. My guest is Gary Sirak. And Gary, my question, I want to go back to budgeting for a minute, because budgeting is a foreign concept to many people. Like you said, nobody budgets anymore. What is some advice you could give on trying to set up a budget?
Well, not having a checkbook is tricky because people don't, but really looking and seeing where you're spending your money every month. And what I have my clients do is literally keep track. I said, I want you to write everything down. I said, I'm going to give you something very old fashioned. I give them a little notebook and a pen and say, here's the deal. Every day this month, I don't care what you bought, I want you to write it down in your book. And they said, do I have to pay for the book? I said, no, I'll give that to you. You can do the homework. I'm good with the book. You keep it. And what I really want them to do is actually pay attention to what they're dropping their dollars on. If I can get them to do that, that's the first beginning of a real budget, because then they'll actually know what they're spending. And if we know that, then we can see what they're making, and we can see how the two match up. If one's really offside, like the earnings is not so good and the spending is bad, we know we have a real problem, and then you can address that.
Okay. And so when you're planning with the budgeting, we know how much our mortgage payment is. We know how much our car payment is, our insurance. Those are set payments. But when we start talking about gas and food and, entertainment, how do you plan for those? Because, of course, each month it could be different. How much would you suggest, say, a padding on that, especially with the rising price of gas right now?
I actually think you almost have to double both of those categories because they're so out of control. I mean, I see what gas is up, it's double. I see what food's doing, and I like grocery stores, so I wander in them periodically, and I look and say, whoa, I can't believe that's that much money for that. Right. And that's disturbing. And the other side of it, entertainment is not inexpensive. And so many people underestimate what their entertainment bill is going to be. I would like them to be realistic and actually tell me what they do on the weekends and how they spend their money. Mm-hmm. That's part of it. Once we know that, Michelle, then you got a fighting chance. And at least you know what you can fix or what you don't want to fix. And you can just say, well, I'm not going to change. I'm going to go to Starbucks every day. And I said, well, that's great. We just program your budget. I'm good with that. We just need to know what should be there and what shouldn't be there.
Okay. Now, I know you've written, it's 3 books, correct, that you've written?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about your books.
Okay, my first book, If Your Money Talked, What Secrets Would It Tell, was written probably 12 years ago. And I literally wrote it because so many of my clients had no clue about money. So they were trying to figure out whatever they were trying to figure out. And I mean, I had one client literally, he was going to Vegas because he thought he could earn enough money to retire by going to Vegas and gambling. And the sad part of it is he was very serious. So that disturbed me. And so I really decided I'm going to write this book and see if I can help as many people as possible with just things to do and not to do. The second book is called The American Dream Revisited. That one happened because I was sitting in a coffee shop. I like coffee, mochas in the morning, and I go to about 5 different places. Well, I sit in one called Karma Cafe. 4 college students sat down at the table behind me. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning one day, and they start talking about the American dream, and they called it the American disaster. And they said, well, their college loans were high, their credit card bills were high, and college was expensive, and everything was, you know, they weren't, and the job market was terrible. They were just very negative. At least 3 of them were. The 4th wasn't negative, and he said, you know, I don't agree with you guys. I think I'm going to graduate from school. I'm going to get a good job. I'm going to earn a good living. I'll pay off my bills, and I'm going to have a really good life. And they shot him down in seconds. I felt bad for him. But that incident, Michelle, really triggered in me something that I didn't see coming, and that was how they talked about the American dream. I did not like that at all. So a couple nights later, probably 4 o'clock in the morning one night, I woke up thinking about this book and what it had to be and how the American dream was just not described in the terms that I would like it to be described. I don't think it's the American disaster. You know, it's not nirvana and perfect, but it was way better than what I heard that day at the table. The third book, How to Retire and Not Die, the 3 Ps that will keep you young, is really my experience with people who don't have a plan when they go into retirement. It can be really ugly, and I've lost some very good friends. I've lost some very good clients who didn't have this figured out, and within a couple of years, they checked out. And Michelle, that was very disturbing. And I couldn't figure out what to do about it. And then one day it dawned on me that I have all these stories. I'm going to tell them. And then my son, who helped me write the book, we put this thing together over a 3-year period. And really, that's how we got there.
Well, that's interesting. And it's very true. It seems today more and more that people just can't handle pressure. They can't handle losing things. They just can't handle the way life is going. And unfortunately, they take matters into their hands and it doesn't turn out well. So that's why it's very important to make a plan. So what other, before we go any further, I would like for you to tell people that are listening how to get in touch with you. GarySirak.com.
Very simple. You'll find me there, and the book's on Amazon and all those places that you put books on. But GarySirak.com gets you right to me, and I answer my emails because I'm always curious what people think, so it's kind of fun. And I've had some great questions, very unique. Some I can't ever repeat, but they were very interesting nonetheless. So, yeah.
Are there any you can share?
Oh yeah, I had one just recently. This one kind of fascinated me. I did a radio show in Boston, and somebody on the radio, somebody picked it up off the radio and actually called, which no one had ever done that before. And I was just barely off the phone with the radio show. And like 15 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's a young girl who lives in Boston, and she happened to be a bookkeeper. She heard the show, and she said, I just was fascinated by your conversation. I'm only 24, but you made me think so different about retirement. I want to get started. What should I do? And so we talked for a couple minutes, and it was, a nice conversation. Then probably 2 days later, she sent me a note and said, hey, I bought your other 2 books and I'm reading them, and I'll let you know what I think when I'm done. I said, great. So hopefully she'll say nice things on Amazon. But I had never had anyone do that. I mean, literally, I had barely gotten off that call, and this young lady called and said, hey, she did send me a note the other day and said, she changed what she was putting into her 401k, which I thought was great.
So a lot of employers allow you, say, to a match. Do you encourage your clients to say match what what the employer's giving, go above, go below? What do you suggest?
I like to see savings in a perfect world at about 15%. In the real world, 10 is a pretty good number. So I'm all about getting the employer match. I count that because it counts. And then it's a matter of saving. So a lot of employers will do, they put in 3% on your 6. So we're already at 9%. And so I'll say, okay, you're at 9%. Why don't you put an extra point in? That'll get you 10. And then we can figure this out. I said, 10 is a great place to be. And with the ideal goal of getting them to 15.
Okay. Okay. And how many years would you say paying in at, even if we were just at 10? Okay. If I started at, age 30 and 10%, could I retire early, or would I still need to work till 62 or 65 to be comfortable?
Well, 62 is pretty young, but doable. It really depends on what you want retirement to look like, Michelle. It's all about what lifestyle do you want to have in retirement? Do you want to have, if you're going to be out jet setting and yachting around the country, you probably need to have a lot of money put away. If you have a nice lifestyle and you're not trying to be the most impressive person on the block, you're probably going to be just fine. What I will say, and this is kind of fun, I have so many people that I would label the millionaire next door. You would never know in a million years these people have any money. They don't look like they have money. They don't live high. They don't go fancy restaurants, but they're very successful. They're very happy in their lifestyle. And, they retire at 62, 65, whatever the number is. And no one has any idea how they're doing it, but I do, because I live with them in a way in that meeting room for the last 25, 30 years. It's pretty incredible to see what people can do when they have their mindset.
Mm-hmm. So say you're living a pretty good lifestyle, okay? What is the reality that you're going to be able to continue that lifestyle? Because I've seen a lot of people that lived a really good lifestyle and they're going and doing and having a great time. And then they retire and all of a sudden they cut way back and they feel that they can't spend a dime.
Yeah, a lot of that's just that whole plan thing that I mentioned to you. That's part of that plan. You got to have one, but you got to have one for the money too. And what I find so interesting is how people think it's okay to spend a lot of their money and not save any, and then they wonder what went wrong. I mean, it's amazing to me, and they don't take blame, of course. It's somebody else's fault, and I just say, really, they're not saving for you. You did this to yourself. Mm-hmm. I have a client that I just was with a couple days ago, and we just had that conversation. I said, you cannot retire the lifestyle that you set yourself up for because you didn't save any money along the way. I said, you kind of blew it on everything. You blew it on cars, vacations, in his case, 3 wives. It was a lot of, I mean, he spent a lot of money and you're not going to get that back. And, he's 72 years old. There's no way he's making that money back. And now he's unhappy because his lifestyle isn't the one he was before.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine that would be pretty disturbing, pretty sad in a sense of way, I guess. So I was wondering, you said earlier in one of your books that money has secrets. And I find that pretty interesting statement. Can you give some examples of that?
Yeah, when I came across If Your Money Talked, What Secrets Would It Tell? It was kind of a fascinating conversation with a client, and they were telling me about their money. And I'm listening to them, and I know their lifestyle, and the lifestyle they're telling me and the lifestyle they're living, they aren't the same thing. So they're saying, yeah, we did this and that. And I said, okay. So he's a doctor, and he makes a very good living. I mean, an excellent living. And he came to see me to get some money so he could buy a new car. Well, this gentleman drove an Audi that was maybe 3 years old, maybe 4 years, in great shape, beautiful car. And I looked at him and I said, okay, you need to tell me, why are you getting a new car? Because I know you don't have many miles on that car and it is immaculate. And he said, it's the oldest car in the doctor's parking lot.
Oh.
And I looked at him and I said, so you're going to take money out of your 401k to impress a bunch of doctors that doesn't really matter. And you're going to set yourself back years by doing this to get a vehicle that's going to depreciate immediately. I said, I'm sorry, this makes no sense. But the money secret for him is that it wasn't making sense. It was his ego. So there's lots of secrets that happen when people spend money. I've seen homes that were beautiful homes. You walk inside, there's no furniture. And I look and I say, okay, that's a pretty interesting money secret. They blew it all in the house and they can't even furnish it. Or I know some people that were going out to dinner all the time. And I couldn't figure it out because I know them and their jobs wouldn't allow them to do that. Well, then I find out they've been doing everything on credit cards. They had almost 50 grand on credit cards, and it was all due to eating out. Now, when the pandemic hit, they couldn't do that. They had to learn how to cook. But they were 50 grand down, literally just entertaining themselves. Their money was telling big secrets if they wanted to listen.
So someone in that deep of debt, where do they start?
I have a rule about that. And the rule is you make a payment towards the principal every time you make a payment. And I don't care if it's $1, if it's $10, it's $100. I said, we'll set something up, but I want a payment on principal every single time. And that's where I get them into the cash mode and say, okay, let's go to cash. Let's go to a debit card so you can't run up these bills. I had one client of mine who was pretty deeply in debt, and I actually got him to do this. And within 3 years, he had wiped out his entire debt structure. In fact, the day he went debt free, he called me up on the phone and said, thank you so much. You have no idea what you've done for me, but this is a day where I sent my last check on something I owe. He said, I owe no one anything except my mortgage. I said, perfect.
Wow. That takes a lot of sacrifice, I'm sure.
A ton.
I'm sure. So do you teach the concept of, say you have 5 credit cards, you're going to attack the one with the highest interest rate first, pay it off, and then whatever you were paying a month for that, now apply it to the next one, and so on and so on?
Absolutely. It's the only way I can see to make this really work, to pay off the highest card and whatever you can pay to get it down and then move on to the next one. And yeah, the guy I was talking about, I believe he had at least 4 or 5 cards. I don't remember exactly, but we definitely did that with his program.
Okay. And is that the $50,000 that was paid off within 3 years?
Well, no, he did.
Okay.
He did some other things. Yeah. He refinanced his house. He did a bunch of things. It wasn't just the credit card savings. No. He had to do some serious work to get that 50,000 gone. We did refinancing on his home, which he was able to do, and some other things to get him down to a lower number.
Okay. So when people are deep in debt, but yet they still want to save for retirement, do you recommend that anybody get like a part-time job or a side job?
I do. And I think that that's very important. And especially I have some clients and I give them a ton of credit. I had a client of mine, he and his wife are going to retire, and they came to me about 5 years before retirement, and they didn't have much put away. And what they decided to do is take her entire income, which was not insignificant, and they were going to save that and live off of his. And so we talked about that. And I also suggested, she's very talented. She could get another job. And they decided just to do this and see what happened. And that was actually a great strategy. I have another couple that we just worked with, and they both have extra jobs because they're trying to set this thing up. They want to be done at 67. They got some work to do, but they're both doing, he's driving Uber or Lyft or one of those things, and actually makes probably close to $700-800 a week doing that.
Wow.
And I think that's really impressive because he's working another job. But he said, if I do this right, he said, Gary, I always want to retire in Florida. He said, if we do this, we'll be able to do that. And I said, absolutely. And they will.
Well, just so you know, I live in Florida. Florida's very expensive.
Oh, where in Florida do you live?
I'm in Estero, Florida. It's in between Naples and Fort Myers. So I'm on the west coast of Florida. And everybody retires here. So there's probably some room. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you're talking a lot about couples. What about the single person?
They have it a lot easier because they can control their spending by themselves. When you have couples, it doesn't always work so well. So, you have one that's really great at saving and one not. So when I have individuals and we sit down, and a great example, Dennis was a really good guy, worked in a construction company for years. And was married, ended up getting divorced, and for the last probably 20 years has been single. And he has done a great job of putting money away for himself. And he also did the wish list. And what he basically figured out is that because he didn't have the significant other spending all that money, he had saved more money than he ever dreamed because he had no idea what was really being spent. And that's just, and it could be the other side. Believe me, I have men that spend money like drunken sailors. There's no equal opportunity for this for sure. Yeah. Equal abusers, let's put it that way.
Right, right. Do you recommend that couples sit down and do their bills together?
I really like that because, in fact, I have a little chapter, money. I have a marriage money agreement in the back, If Your Money Talked. And the reason I did that is because I had a couple and they were having a discussion, and I stopped and I said, okay, you need to have an agreement, guys. I said, you need to get together once a month, talk about who's paying what bill. You need to divide the bills up and make this fair based on your incomes, and then have a meeting at the end of the month and just reassess where you are. I said, take 15 minutes. And I want you to do that for 1 year. And then I want you to come back to me and tell me how it worked.
Okay. We have a few minutes left. And again, just let everybody know how to get in touch with you, the names of your books, and any other information you'd like to share.
Okay. It's GarySirak.com. And the name of the book, the newest book is called How to Retire and Not Die, the 3 Ps that will keep you young. And I recommend that for anybody approaching retirement. If you're 45, 50, you're starting to think about that, this book will help you because it'll give you some pretty good guidelines and guide rails on how to figure this out. The second book, The American Dream Revisited, is just me talking about the American dream and why I think it's still here. And If Your Money Talked, What Secrets Would It Tell, is just my spin on how money really works. It's stories. It's all stories. It's all these clients, and I changed all their names so they couldn't sue me. But some were just total train wrecks. Some were pretty good. And I just give their stories and say what they did wrong and how to fix it.
And what's your best advice for people listening right now?
If you're thinking about retiring, I would ask you to go look for what I call a retirement mentor. Somebody who's got retirement figured out and who you admire and like, and go buy them coffee, lunch, whatever it is, and ask them how they figured it out, because it's not easy. And so if you can find someone happily retired who you can have a relationship with, they can really help you in this process. And I believe that's really critically important to having a successful retirement.
Yes. And it is very important to have a mentor in your life, period, whether it's for retirement or learning a business, any kind of mentor, they're most important. Absolutely. So Gary, thank you so much for being on the show today and for telling us about your books and budgeting and everything that we need to start saving for retirement if we're not already saving for retirement.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here. This is really enjoyable. Talking about this stuff. It's important.
It is. It's very important. It's probably one of the most important things to talk about. And then it's not just money, like you said. It's having that wonderful retirement to look forward to. So thank you.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to be a guest of the show or a sponsor of the show, please contact me at info@openpagespublishing.com. That's info@openpagespublishing.com. This is Michelle reminding you to start today and live the life you were meant to live.